Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Supatease video, and in this one, we've got the Havoc Demon Hunter. Now, this is one that seemingly on the surface has had not too much changed to it, but I specifically went through every single spell on the retail game, scrolled over their tooltips, and compared them to the tooltips on Shadowlands to go over all of the differences that you may have not noticed that are slipping under the radar at the moment. So I'm going to go through all of their abilities, what they're getting baseline, what they're getting that's new, go through all of their talents, what's new again, and what has been changed that you may be unaware of currently. Now, do remember this is an early stage of the alpha. Things are subject to change. We are now seeing new honor talents being introduced, which I'm very excited about. And there is one for Havoc Demon Hunter that you'll want to wait to see in this video. That is pretty insane. But first of all, what you'll notice when you log into Shadowlands is that your spells have been moved into a Demon Hunter overall spellbook. This means that Vengeance and Havoc will share them. There aren't massive changes here overall, but when I looked at Chaos Nova, you'll see that it's still a 1 minute cooldown. It still costs 30 Fury, and then when an enemy is stunned, it has a chance to generate a soul fragment, which currently is exactly the same as the retail game. Chaos Strike is going to slice your target for some damage, and it has a chance to refund some Fury, which is currently exactly the same as the retail game. Consume Magic is going to be consuming one beneficial effect from your opponent, which is basically a purge, and it's going to generate a little bit of Fury, 10-second cooldown, 30-second range. And the one difference you're going to notice with this is that your passive from your Azurite trait that provided a significant heal is going to be gone, so you won't be getting a shield from this anymore, but its baseline spell is still effectively the same. Demon's Bite dealing damage, generating Fury. It's the same thing here, 20 to 30 Fury. Damage scaled down, obviously, for Shadowlands. Don't be too unhappy about that. Now, you'll see Disrupt is still a 10-yard range on Shadowlands. It's currently a 10-yard range on retail. I heard rumors that it was going to melee range, but at the moment, still 10-yard range, still a 3-second interrupt that generates 30 Fury on a 15-second cooldown. No changes. Fell Rush towards your target, 10-second recharge. You still have 2 charges of them. I've been hearing rumors that mobility is starting to be reduced down. There are a lot of unhappy mages in that boot camp, but at the moment, Fell Rush still with 2 charges on the same cooldown. Glide is still the same, being able to slow fall. Immolation Aura is baseline. So if you'll remember, Immolation Aura used to be a talent. Now instead of being it's still kind of a talent. You can get it for some AoE damage, for maybe some Mythic Plus dungeons or PvE, but in PvP, the AoE damage component really isn't that relevant. The main reason you were taking Immolation Aura when it was a talent here was because it generated Fury. It lasts 2 seconds longer than the current Battle for Azeroth game, so it's going up from 10 to 12. It lasts a little bit longer, but it generates the same Fury over a long period of time, making it a bit less bursty. You won't be getting as many Blade Dances or Chaos Strikes after activating it immediately. But if you take Burning Hatred, it's still functionally the same, generating Fury, and that's the main component, at least for PvP. Now, Imprison, 45-second cooldown, 20-yard range, which I believe hasn't changed at all. 20-yard range, 1-minute cooldown on Battle for Azeroth, so Imprison is actually going down 15 seconds on cooldown. I think that's because I'm talented into an honor talent. Let me double check this. No, it's still exactly the same. So 45-second cooldown, and I think in PvP it lasts 2 seconds rather than 1 minute. 1 minute would be pretty nuts, but no changes there. Metamorphosis, 4-minute cooldown, leaping into the air, stunning certain types of mobs, and players are dazed instead. Upon landing, you enter a demon form, and you'll get enhanced Blade Dance and Chaos Strike abilities with Haste and Leech. This is slightly nerfed, I believe. I have to change all my essences on retail to make sure that it is. Alright, so we've got 3-minute cooldown meta. I think it's because I'm Vision of Perfection. Do note that without these essences, these cooldowns are going to be going back to a substantial period of time. When I looked at my meta on the retail game, it said that I had like a minute and something cooldown meta, and then you look at this and it's like it's 4 minutes. At the moment I see 3 minutes, but there's also possibly Azerite traits impacting this. Doesn't look like it. How is my meta a 3 minute? No, 4. There we go. Finally, we've made it the same. So 4 minute cooldown, jump in the air, stun mobs, but only daze players. You're transformed for 30 seconds. You get 30% leech and 25% haste. So in this, you'll notice you get 25% haste and 25% leech. So 5% less leech. And you'll notice that leech has actually been reduced a little bit overall when we get to the talents pages. So meta currently with 5% less leech, which could be substantial to Demon Hunters and player versus player. It might be impactful to your solo quest experience. Perhaps you're not going to be at 100% health the entire time that you're blowing up all the mobs, which in my opinion is a good thing. Throw glaive. Now, because I'm typed into Master of the Glaive, it's going to be different. You don't really play Master of the Glaive in the live game. I've got a 7.4 cooldown on live and an 8.2 seconds on alpha. Now that might be... How is that? I'm going to spec into Master of the Glaive on the... So it looks like it is slightly nerfed. 8.2 second recharge, and then on my retail game I've got 7.4 second recharge, dealing damage and ricocheting. And if you talent, it will slow people. Generally, at least in player versus player, this is kind of like a filler. You kill a Psy Fiend with it, or a Tentacle, but Tentacles will, I think, will be gone. Maybe there's a new version of it. But maybe it's like a Totem Stomper. You kill a Grounding Totem from ranged. This ability doesn't really function in the rotation of the class anymore unless you just absolutely have no other button to press. You're rooted with nothing else to do. You can't purge or do anything else. You might press it. Whereas in Legion, if you remember, with the Bloodlet talent, it applied a bleed. It was pretty much your top damage. You always wanted to be buffing it with momentum and dotting with the bleed from Bloodlet. But now it doesn't look like it's going to have any sort of rotational effect in Shadowlands either. It's kind of just a dead ability used more for those like niche situations. It's not going to be built into your rotation whatsoever. Taunt is still taunt. Nothing different there. Vengeful Retreat, 25-second cooldown, dealing a little bit of damage and slowing movement speed by 70%. Still the same. Chaos Brand is 5% more magic damage. Still the same. Good old double jump, not going anywhere. At least we would hope it wouldn't. Now, this is where the first big difference is that I noticed. On the retail game, if you've ever fought a Demon Hunter and you're a melee class and you've had them blade dance and dodge your bash, you probably got really upset by it. Okay, that's because on the retail game, Blade Dance is a 7.4 second cooldown. It deals quite a bit of damage, and you have a increased dodge chance of 100% for 1 second. Now, look at this: 8.2 second cooldown, slightly nerfed. Strike your this might be haste modifiers on my retail characters as far as the cooldowns go, but you'll notice it's missing the 100% dodge component. It does not have 100% dodge. And on the Blade Dance on retail, it does specifically say increase your chance to dodge by 100%. So this is where the first significant change to Demon Hunter is that I noticed. I don't know if they intend to add an extra ability that enhances your next Blade Dance to dodge. I think that would be a better way of enabling that type of outplay mechanic. Or they may have decided to say that in dungeons and PvE, it's too strong. There are lots of mechanics in dungeons and raids that you can totally immune with a Demon Hunter. You can taunt Blade Dance and immune a mechanic. And also, it's frustrating in PvP. But at the same time, I do like the idea of like this mini 1 second dodge window, similarly to the old Spell Reflect for Warrior. I like that mechanic. I didn't like that it was in every single Blade Dance because you couldn't tell whether or not the Demon Hunter was just pressing the button to do damage or if they were intentionally trying to dodge something. So seeing something like an honor talent maybe, but an honor talent would have to do more than just 100% dodge, I think, to be relevant over the other honor talent options. But something to bring back that type of gameplay in a more I meant to do that way, rather than I'm just pressing the button because I have it kind of way. That would be nice. But that's the first major change. So unless something happens there, you won't have to worry about Blade dancing any of your stuff. The next change here that I noticed is that Blur is slightly weaker. 1 minute cooldown, 50% dodge, 20% damage reduction. And on the live game, it's currently a 1 minute cooldown, 50% dodge, that's still the same, but 35% damage reduction. And you can talent it up to 50. So Blur is reduced by 15% damage reduction, which is pretty significant in player versus player. It's also pretty significant in PvE. Damage reduction cooldowns are really strong in like Mythic Plus dungeons, so you can use them on AoE effects to not die. With 15% less, maybe you don't survive a big AoE hit anymore. Could be significant there. But in player versus player, it matters a lot because this is your one tool. Basically, Demon Hunter's only weakness is that they are susceptible to crowd control and dying in stuns. If this is lower damage reduction, even if you press it before being stunned, you're a lot more likely to die. That was the second big change that I noticed between the retail version and the Shadowlands version. Now we've got Darkness, 5 minute cooldown, 8-yard radius, granting friendly targets a 20% chance. So you have a 20% chance to ice block on a 5 minute cooldown. Now Darkness on the retail game, when you're not spec cover of Darkness, is that actually correct? Is my tooltip not updating? It's a 3 minute cooldown, 8-yard radius, 20%. So Darkness is going up to a 5 minute cooldown? I must be missing something. That seems insane. 2 minute longer cooldown? Now obviously if you spec into cover of Darkness, you'll not get any cooldown reduction on it. You won't get any cooldown reduction on it. So on Shadowlands, Darkness is a 5 minute cooldown, and you can still make it big, so 70% chance to ice block. But on the live game, it's a 3 minute cooldown. This is a big change. I mean, we're looking just through the Havoc talents. Like, on the surface, like I said, it didn't look like much was changing with Demon Hunter, but now they're not going to randomly dodge your stuff. They're way easier to kill in stuns, and their big team cooldown is almost double the cooldown. This means that you don't want to just rotationally press this. Did the Ret Paladin press Avenging Wrath? Well, we can Darkness. It'll probably be up for the next one, and we'll use it again. We need to try and make it through this, because if I use this, I won't have it the next time. And obviously Darkness is really strong in PvE as well. Raid Ice Block, it's pretty good. So making this a 5 minute cooldown makes sense, but if you're a Demon Hunter player, you're probably not the most happy about it. I-Beam, still a 30-second cooldown, 30 Fury, guaranteed crits, damage over 2.7 seconds, and it does reduce damage to secondary targets. 30-second cooldown. Oh, your primary target takes 50%. I'm wondering if that's an Azurite trait. I think that it is. Possibly. Might not be. Alright, so your primary target takes 50% more damage is the main difference that I'm seeing on the retail game over to this. Again, durations and cooldowns and recharge times might be different because my haste is higher on the retail game, so looking at cooldowns and like damage over 2.7 rather than damage over 1.6 might not be relevant. But reduced damage to secondary targets. So I'm wondering if they just simplified the tooltip there, and that still means that it's doing more damage to the main target. It's just to make it do 50%. So no, it makes it sound like it's getting a lot less cleave, or just a lot less damage overall. Maybe this is one that I'm a little bit uncertain on. It's hard to read because the last sentence of the tooltip on Shadowlands is deals reduced damage to secondary targets, but the last sentence on the retail game is your primary target takes 50% increased damage, which means that your cleave targets are taking reduced, your main target's taking more, which is the same here, but is it actually more? Because the numbers are scaled down, that's hard to test. That's something that when the arena testing comes around, that's when I'll want to look and see like how impactful is I-Beam feeling comparatively to the current Battle for Azeroth game. So that's one thing to definitely keep an eye on. I-Beam could be significantly weaker. And it is important to note that they are reducing AoE, a lot of AoE spells, potentially all of them. So anything that used to be hits all targets, this is not a good example of that, but there's another one that's a good example. Instead of hits all targets, it's something like hits 3 targets, hits 5 targets. They're really trying to limit the potential of just pulling 10,000 things and stunning them and blowing them up instantly, which I personally like, because when you do that, you don't engage with the monsters in the dungeon. They could cast important spells that you need to be interrupting. They could have fun mechanics that you don't see because you just obliterate them in a stun with one AoE button. Sure, if you like being number one on the DPS meter, pressing one button, and that makes you feel good and happy, which I'm sure it does for a lot of people, you're having fun. But I miss like crowd controlling one of the mobs and pulling them back and trying to actually interact with the mobs rather than just you're dead. That's just not fun to me. So I'm excited about the changes to AoE abilities in general that they're making. So yeah, Fell Barrage is the first example of it. So I'm talented into this, and Fell Barrage kind of fell off. You don't use it nearly as much as Legion, but on the retail game, Battle for Azeroth, it's damage all enemies within 8 yards on a 1 minute cooldown, and Fell Barrage is now over 3 seconds to 5 enemies within 8 yards. So you're not just immediately blowing up everything around you anymore with this. Demonic Wards, I saw patch notes that said that this was nerfed, but when I'm in the actual Shadowlands game, it's still 10% damage reduction, passive to magic damage. So there's no difference there. Your Mastery is still increasing chaos damage and your movement speed, which is still the same. Mastery is still the same. Shattered Souls, killing an enemy sometimes creates a soul fragment that is consumed when you approach it, healing you for 20% of your maximum health. If the soul fragment came from a demon, you will deal increased damage, and I don't think this has changed. Generating 30 Fury. Oh, you generate Fury from... I wonder if it's because I've got a talent. Yeah, I've got a talent for it. Okay, so it's the same. Unrestrained Fury is a passive. You get 20% more Fury. Interesting. Well, we still have 120 Fury, so this is the same. And then they're making an Azerite trait. Demonic Transformation, I believe. I'm just double checking. Chaotic Transformation. They're basically making that baseline, so when you activate Metamorphosis, you'll reset your I-Beam and your Blade Dance. But remember, Vision of Perfection is gone to reduce the cooldown of your Metamorphosis, so it could be less impactful overall, although this is one of the more fun mechanics of Demon Hunter, is going for that Blade Dance I-Beam meta, Blade Dance I-Beam burst window, at least when I'm playing it on the live game. But unless there's something new coming to reduce the cooldown of meta, your meta is going to be a 4 minute cooldown. So pretty big changes in the Havoc window overall. You can see a lot of their sort of team utility, raid utility, and personal defensives are going down a lot compared to the retail game. Because I remember when people were seeing the new honor talent that we've almost got to, the new crazy honor talent we almost got to, and they think, wow, that's insane, I can't believe that. But now it may not matter as much. So they're possibly going to be very easy to kill. Blind Fury is still the same, I believe, here, now that we move on to the talents. It generates 40 Fury on retail every second, and its duration is increased by 50%. I-Beam generates increased by 50%. Demonic Appetite, Chaos Strike has a chance to spawn a soul fragment, granting 30 Fury and reducing the remaining cooldown of your I-Beam. So this has been buffed on... So it's got, I think it's got the Eyes of Rage Azerite trait baked into the talent now. So when you eat a soul fragment, your I-Beam is reduced. I'm 99% sure that they put Eyes of Rage. It's similar to Eyes of Rage. It's a slightly nerfed version of Eyes of Rage. Actually, no, it's a buffed version of Eyes of Rage into Demonic Appetite. So Demonic Appetite is a lot better. And like I said, because meta is a way longer cooldown, you won't reset it as often. So this could be a good way of resetting I-Beam. So Demonic Appetite was buffed. Chaos Fellblade is a 14-second cooldown. It's 12-second cooldown on the retail game, so slightly longer. Deals fire damage, has a chance to reset, and it generates 40 Fury. That's the same. Does damage. Cooldown of Fellblade gets reduced by Demon's Bite and generates 40 Fury. So just this little bit of slightly longer cooldown. Again, maybe that's impacted by my haste values on the retail game. Insatiable Hunger, Demon's Bite deals 20% more damage, so that's a buff to this talent, and generates up to 10 additional Fury. So instead of just only generating 10 additional Fury, that's what it does, you can make your Demon's Bite hit way harder. Demon's Blade is exactly the same, just replace Demon's Bite. Yeah, I hate this talent personally. I don't like removing a button away from my character. You just kind of sit there and you feel starved the entire time. I've honestly never liked Demon's Blades. But then Burning Hatred is your way to get the old Immolation or a Fury generation. But there is potentially more contest here with Insatiable Hunger, depending on how much damage you can get your Demon's Bite to do. But this then means that Immolation Aura is maybe only used in PvP, at least, to pull targets out of stealth, keep them in combat. because its damage is very low, at least in Battle for Azeroth PvP. So you may just never press Immolation Aura, even if it's baseline, if you don't take Burning Hatred. But perhaps Insatiable Hunger gets a little bit more game time. Right now, Demon's Blade not used too much in PvP, perhaps used a lot in PvE though, so it hasn't changed. Trail of Rune, the final slash of Blade Dance, inflicts an additional 416 chaos damage over 4 seconds. Okay, over 4 seconds. It's the same, no change. Fel Mastery increases Fel Rush damage by 150. This got buffed. So it's 50% stronger. It's 150% damage of Fel Rush rather than 100%, which in PvE may be a better contest than Fel Barrage, because Fel Rush will still hit all of your targets. So maybe they're trying to bring back the gameplay of Fel Rushing through all of the mobs and then Fel Rushing back through them to do your AoE damage, rather than the Fel Barrage build, because he's only going to hit hit 5 targets within 8 yards rather than all targets like it is on the retail game. There's a bit of a contest for the AoE damage. Now, Trail of Rune is still just you're guaranteed anything in melee range. Fel Mastery and Trail of Rune are like, you're basically doing the same thing, hit everything with a bunch of AoE damage, but one of them eats up your movement spell, so you can't use it to get out of something or get to something, and the other one is just baked into your basic damage spell. So I don't really see why you want to inconvenience yourself, unless it does dramatically more damage. Why you would want to inconvenience yourself to not just have the AoE damage on a spell you're already doing damage with, rather than one that's eating your movement. This row is a little bit wonky to me, but again, that's something that will be tested more when Arena comes out or when Mythic Plus testing comes out. But there's a little bit of a difference there. Fel Barrage is weaker, Fel Mastery is stronger. Soul Rending is a lot weaker, and this is very impactful in PvP. It's only 5% increased leech, whereas on the retail game it's 10% baseline all the time. However, it's 25% more leech when you're in meta, which is 15% stronger. So your leech healing in meta with this is 15% better, but your leech healing outside of meta is significantly lower. So the name of the game, at least in my mind, looking at this in PvP, is crowd control the Demon Hunter when he's in Metamorphosis, avoid him, wait for it to be over, then start attacking him, which has always kind of been the case. You didn't normally want to attack him unless you could stun him in Metamorphosis, because they were doing all of that leech gameplay. But which I don't mind when it's during Metamorphosis, but their leech throughout the entire game, even without it, seemed too high. So this is nice, reducing it overall. Blur now reduces damage additionally only by 10%. You automatically blur below 35%. This is nerfed by 5%. And remember, the baseline blur was also nerfed. So you can only get blur up to 30% damage reduction rather than 50% damage reduction. Blur is significantly weaker. Netherwalk has also been nerfed significantly. It's still an ice block that you can run really fast in. 3-minute cooldown instead of 2 minutes. They're really hammering down on nerfing these cooldowns, which I personally like, because in player versus player, I think there's way too many of them. There's lots of cases where you just press 2 of them and it doesn't matter in a situation, and you've still got another one 20 seconds later to use. And it's also impactful to PvE, because obviously ice block mechanics are really good at avoiding certain mechanics of bosses, and you tend to take those classes that have cheat deaths, ice blocks, nether walks. So making them weaker by increasing their cooldown means that you've really got to make sure you're using it when you need to use it, and you're not going to get to just kind of so frequently use it. So Demon Hunter's defense, from my first look here, has gone down a lot compared to the Battle for Azeroth game. So anyone that's been thinking like Demon Hunter's going to be crazy with this new honor talent that's coming out, they might be pretty easy to kill, actually, at the end of the day. Cycle of Hatred, I believe, has changed slightly. You get one extra second on cooldown reduction. And because all the other cooldown reduction doesn't exist, perhaps you want to take that. But Essence Break is pretty big, too. And you'll notice it's been renamed and when we get there. But First Blood is still reducing the cost of Blade Dance. And it's got a bit of increased damage to the first target hit. That's no different, but Essence Break is really different. So this is called Dark Slash, and it's kind of like a meme, at least in PvP. I don't have much experience of using it, at least in Mythic Plus, although I do run a 15 every week on my Demon Hunter. But it's kind of a meme that you use for a one-shot build in my other video. But now it might not be a meme, because it just does damage, 20-second cooldown, but it buffs 2 of your spells. It buffs Chaos Strike and Blade Dance, and I would imagine it buffs their meta-formed abilities as well. Whereas Dark Slash on the retail game is only Chaos Strike. So this could be pretty crazy. Essence Break as a talent to just buff your damage. Maybe we see like an Essence Break Nemesis build come back, and Demon Hunter becomes a more bursty single target. But this is a major change overall to their damage, and does make it more of a contest on this row, for sure. Unleashed Power, reduce the cooldown and the Fury cost of your Chaos Nova. There's no difference there. Master of the Glaive has 2 charges and snares. There's no difference there. Fell Eruption is a 30-second cooldown and stuns for 4 seconds, which is still the same. So no changes on their utility row here. Demonic, Eye Beam causes you to enter Demon form for 6 seconds after it finishes. That's nerfed. Demonic on the live game is for 8 seconds. So 2 seconds less time in meta, which again, if you get crowd control, you get nice, insane healing during meta, but if you get crowd controlled, you lose it. And 6 seconds is a lot less than 8. So Demonic got hit pretty hard here, considering you're almost always taking it. Momentum. Fell Rush increases your damage by 15% for 6 seconds. Vengeful Retreat's cooldown is reduced by 5 seconds, and it generates 80 Fury. So they've baked a couple of passives together into this talent. But it's still the same, I believe. It's still exactly the same, so no changes. But perhaps we see Momentum Fell Mastery. We see sort of that Momentum rushing around build again to try and recapture the old hit everything with your AoE that is now lost from Fell Barrage. And maybe we see it in PvP. But depending on how this all goes, perhaps Demon Hunter turns into like the all-in Swifty one-shot class with Nemesis and Essence Break. Nemesis is 2-minute cooldown. You get 20% more damage on the target for a minute. I think it's slightly nerfed in PvP, but maybe it's not anymore. They might have reverted that. When the target is slain, you will inflict 20% more damage against that type, and that's 2-minute cooldowns, exactly the same. So there's a lot of changes in these talents that we've seen now overall. Demon Hunter survivability is much lower. Potentially their sustained healing is going to be much lower as well. You may have a more difficult time solo questing, although I didn't really have a hard time in Torghast, so maybe the healing is not even going to be too impactful. But Honor Talents is what we got left here. So far, no new trinket options and nothing has been removed. Cleansed by Fire, Immolation Aura. So this used to only be Vengeance. Vengeance Demon Hunter. Now Havoc gets it. So if you get Frost Nova'd, you can use Immolation Aura to dispel yourself. That gives Immolation more of a use outside of just needing Burning Hatred. This is great if you're just doing random battlegrounds or you're by yourself with no healer to dispel you and you want to move. Could be good in 2 versus 2 as well, because Immolation Aura is going to be half the cooldown of Reverse Magic, which is what you normally use to get out of Roots. If you really hate Roots, you could run both of them. Mana Rift hasn't changed, still just an Eruption. I would love to see this spell gone. I personally do not like mana burn mechanics, especially this one, because you almost can't interact with it because you're stunned. Otherwise you will just move out of it and then it doesn't really serve too much of a purpose, but it's still there. Demonic Origins, Metamorphosis is reduced by 2 minutes, but it will last half as long. It's still the same. Rain from Above is still the same. Detainment, still the same. Mana Break, still the same. And here's the new one. Your Fell Rush afflicts its target. Afflicts targets it deals damage to with Mortal Wound, which is healing reduction. Reduces the effectiveness of healing on the target for until cancelled. So maybe, this is where I was thinking, like maybe a Fell Rush momentum build, and then you're just dashing through the team applying Mortal Strike. Now you might be thinking, well, now Demon Hunter has everything. You have Mortal Strike, you have movement, you have Polymorph DR, you have stuns, you have Blur. You still don't have a slow, unless you talent it here, but you lose a stun. If you do talent it, you could effectively have all utility. This is pretty insane because this enables a spec that, if it's a melee class, to play with more than just other melee. You'll notice that any class that's melee and doesn't have mortal wounds, you don't really often see them play with a spellcaster. You don't see a demon hunter play with a mage. You maybe see them with a warlock, very rarely. For a little while you saw them with the Moonkin, but I think that was just synergy reasons and more of kind of like abusing mana rift strategies. But you don't really see the Shadow Priest Demon Hunter. But if they get Mortal Strike, that's what spellcasters need on their team, is a reduction in healing. So I actually like this talent if it enables new compositions for Demon Hunter, like Shadow Priest Demon Hunter, Moonkin Demon Hunter, Mage Demon Hunter. Um, I personally like it. It's also the honor talents for Demon Hunter are super impactful. It's really hard to decide, like, what are you going to take? I need Team Ice Block. I want Cyclone, basically, when you take Detainment, instant cast Cyclone. I want to fly up in the air and do huge damage to everybody. I want to generate more Fury. I have Leothras, it's kind of not that great. Now I want to dispel myself out of Frost Novas. I want a Mana Rift healers. Like, you have so many honor talents, it's really tough to make that choice. But I don't know. Maybe obviously a 2 versus 2, this is going to be kind of stressful. But it also means that you want to make sure you land your Fel Rush. So in a lot of cases, you want to swap targets, right? So you Fel Rush to them. There's no guarantee that you're going to hit them with it. It's not that long of a range. There's no guarantee you're going to hit them. It means that you have to aim it to hit them if you want to swap and apply the effect, rather than just kind of doing it seemingly in their direction. Now, it's really good against melee that are all standing on top of each other, right? So if you just dash through them and apply Mortal Strike to them. But then you're also giving your mobility up to swap targets. You're giving your mobility up to run away. So there's big trade-offs when you're going to be taking this. The initial look at it is like, wow, Demon Hunters don't need a Mortal Strike. That's insane. But there are big trade-offs to taking this. And also, I like it if it enables more Demon Hunter comps. Specifically the Spellcaster melee. In my opinion, ranged melee healer is the most fun arena compositions, because you have all of the different aspects of the game. You have a class that needs to worry about pushing in and going out, and then you have a class that's trying to get crowd control and avoid interrupts. So I personally like this if it enables those, and it does have a drawback trading your mobility and having to land your Fel Rush rather than just kind of doing it in their direction. I think it adds a little bit more to the class. Although it is definitely crazy, right, for a Demon Hunter to have a Mortal Strike effect. Other than that, I don't believe there's any changes in the remaining honor talents, just this crazy one. And then they have Covenant abilities coming out, which I can't currently unlock in Shadowlands, but I think one of them is like in for the hunt or in for the kill or something. It's basically Illidan's ultimate from Heroes of the Storm. I think you ignore line of sight. It's a huge range, and it's a super mega Fel Rush. You just right to the target with a really long cooldown. Now that seems really crazy in Battlegrounds. Just jump to the flag carrier if you can jump through walls. Although I'd imagine that it's going to disconnect you, probably. But we'll have to wait and see how impactful it is overall. Now that's going to conclude this video for the initial look at Demon Hunter. On the surface, it looked like they didn't do a lot to it, but after diving into it and looking specifically at the tooltips, it looks like quite a bit has changed. Survivability looks to be a lot lower. Their burst AoE damage to all targets is much lower, and they've got a bit of added utility that could potentially open up their composition pool in player versus player. It certainly makes them more desirable in rated battlegrounds, applying Mortal Strike to multiple targets when you Fel Rush. So, Demon Hunter looking interesting so far. I'm going to keep my eye on it. I've been enjoying my Demon Hunter on the retail game. My goals are to try and push rank 1 for it. I think we're currently at 2300 at the moment, so maybe we got enough time to get good and try and make a push with it. So, I hope you enjoyed the video, and have a good day. We'll see you in the next one.